That is
Yeah,
absolutely true.
it's life. So, but yeah, I've been okay. You?
Yeah, not bad. I had one interview this week since I got laid off a couple weeks ago after 9 years with my previous company, and obviously no loyalty there. You gotta love corporations that get new management, young talent in there, and all they see are numbers. And yeah, but anyway, and I have another interview coming up on Friday, which I'm actually excited about. So we'll see. We'll see what
I,
happens.
yeah, I have faith it'll turn out good for you. So,
Yeah, same here. So we are going to be talking about triggers this week, and as I mentioned in the trailer and the description of the show, that most people think triggers are bad. Anything you see on social media, oh, I'm triggered, he's triggered, we triggered her, she triggered. Not all triggers are bad. There's actually good triggers,
yeah.
like sense of food or songs or something that reminds you of your childhood that was good, or at least a point in your life that was good. So, is there anything that you can think of? I know you had a rough childhood,
Yeah.
and rough teenage years, but is there anything that you see or hear or something reminds you of any good times or any solace that you had growing up that you could think of?
Yeah, I mean, when my sister was alive, we used to dance out in the front yard on the lawn to Madonna and Janet Jackson.
Nice.
Back when there was tape, like the music that was on little cassette tapes,
Yep. Yep.
and a little boom box, and we would play that, and we would just dance like idiots out in the front the front lawn. So every time I hear like a Madonna song or a Janet Jackson song, it brings me back to memories with my sister, uh, and those are good memories. So um, I have good memories with her, and then I have good memories with family over the years that I've had. So one of my favorite things is I love water. Growing up in Clinton, Iowa, we have what we call I don't know, they call it the dike. I don't know. It's kind of a weird name, but it's
It
it's
can be.
next to the Mississippi River, and
Yep.
they had built it. There's a casino there that's a little showboat. It used to be like an actual boat that would go up and down the river and give tours. That's a place where I'd find myself a lot. Like growing up, kids would cruise where you cruise the main street in your car and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So the kids would cruise along this dike, and I would find myself a lot of times. The Clinton Lumber Kings is a minor baseball league team that plays out of Clinton, Iowa, and so we would always find ourselves that baseball field is right next to the Mississippi River, and so we'd go there. And the place of solace is water. I found I really like to hike up to mountain lakes and just be there, present with the water. That's actually where I feel closest to God or just my faith in general.
Yeah.
So I like to go to places like that. I've had people I've dated, they're like, why would you want to hike 7 miles to a mountain lake and do nothing?
Right.
Like, you do all that work, you want to sit and just enjoy the water and enjoy the peace and quiet and the tranquility of no cell phones, no traffic, no anything. So I think that is a good memory for me where I'm able to just kind of be myself and be with one and be in peace and not have to worry. It helps my anxiety too. I think that's a thing people don't realize. Like, there's times where you're, like I told you about kayaking a few weeks ago, when you are by yourself, there's times where it'll make your mind go rampant because your mind is already in that state. And so sometimes it'll make it worse. And then there's
Sure.
other times where when you're away from things and people, it helps your mind kind of digress a little bit more.
Yep.
So I find it odd. There are certain things that bring me peace and other things that don't. But what about you?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Like, I'm really triggered by either like movies or songs. I can think whenever I hear oh god, it's an Extreme song, More Than Words by Extreme. It takes me back to a town fair that we had in Connecticut, in Windsor, where I grew up, called the Shad Derby.
Okay.
And they'd have all kinds of booths and rides, and had like a goldfish swallowing contest, and it's like a big thing on the town square in Windsor. And that was back in like 90 or 91 when that song came out. So that was kind of a chill period of my life before my parents got divorced.
Okay.
So it's one of my last happy memories. But yeah, I'm super triggered by that. Or movies that I watched when I was a kid that I could just the dumbest movies ever. Like I could still pick up and watch. It just brings me back to that time where I was happy. So, and it's funny. There's so much stuff from like 89 and 90 before my parents got divorced that I kind of revert to, like wrestling. I've been a big wrestling fan since like 1988. And I don't watch as much new wrestling anymore, but I'll still go back on Peacock and watch the old WWE stuff from the late 90s and or late 80s and early 90s because that's the last time I can remember being happy. So, uh,
It's interesting that you say that with wrestling. So that might be why I hold on to bowling like I do.
mhm,
As I told you, I had thought about hanging up my laces and being done
right,
after this last season, bowling season, for good. I think the one reason I can't give it up is those are the good core memories from my childhood that brought me joy.
yeah,
When I had no joy and I had the trauma and the triggers surrounding me, bowling was always there. And bowling has still always been there for me. I mean, I took a few years hiatus when I moved to Idaho from Iowa, but that being said, like that's my place I go back to. I always revert back to bowling. So I think bowling too brings that sense of peace for me mentally. So with that being said, like we were talking today a little bit about like what are we going to do with the show, and I was thinking back to the first a couple of episodes that we had, and things that I was like, well, we could delve deep into something different. So like trauma and triggers, and you had mentioned there's positive and there's negative triggers, and they kind of go hand in hand, positive, negative. So there's the triggers like you're when you have something traumatic happen to you. So take for me, for instance, like being molested for 6 years of my childhood life, almost 7.
yep,
Okay. So there are triggers based on that trauma that happened. And a lot of times when triggers happen, people that have overcome the trauma, so I've overcome and I've healed from it, but the triggers are still there. It's just a matter of identifying what the triggers are. A lot of times when you're in relationships, either with a spouse, married or dating, or in relationships with friends, you're surrounded by friends, or relationships business wise or professionally, you sometimes do not realize that those triggers have hit you until after the fact, after you've open mouth, insert foot, after you've lashed out, after you've gotten emotional about something, or you've shared something, or you've expressed concern about something. You don't often realize what those triggers are until after you've already expressed it and you've either already hurt someone else's feelings, you've already caused tensions to rise or emotions to take over. And that's where it's very important that I've learned, especially in the last couple of years, I've had to learn to identify my triggers and be more cognizant and saying to myself, okay, they said or acted that way. It might have triggered me, but they, I am not allowed to make them feel a certain way or treat them a certain way based on my trigger. So in order to, you have to identify, and in order to deal with it, you have to express to that person, express to them, say you're in a relationship, express what that trigger was that they did that caused you to behave or talk in a certain way, and then take accountability, express apologetically what you meant by it, and then move forward. Therefore, the person you're talking to gets not only to know you, your personality, but they better understand your triggers and they can better help you cope with them in moving forward. Now, in a business professional setting, I've had things happen to me before where a boss will yell and scream, why didn't you do this? How come you're doing it this way? You
right,
need to do this. And then they cause extra anxiety. Okay. So that can be a trigger for some people. Not only the raised voice, which is a sensory trigger, but then you have the accusatory criticizing, which is verbal triggers. So you have all of that going on that are all triggers, and your boss has no idea because it's your boss. You're not going to stop and say, whoa, 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 you're triggering me. So you have to learn at some point to identify your triggers. So that way you don't take things so personally. I spent a lot of my life not knowing that the majority of my reactions to people was caused by triggers, which has made my life difficult. I've made my own life difficult in certain ways when it comes to keeping friendships intact, keeping relationships with family members intact, keeping relationships. I had a habit of when things got bad, I just wanted to be done. And I see that a lot in this generation. Things get hard and they just want to play the tap out game. Like they don't want to work through it. They don't want to talk through it. They don't want to be emotionally available. They want to be disconnected. And then that gets into a whole bunch of other stuff, which with attachment styles, which I brought up before. There's the avoidant attachment style and the, it's my attachment style. Can't think of it off the top of my head, but there's two different attachment styles, and I'm the one where I have to constantly have reassurance. I have to have somebody that makes me feel valued, and I have to have that integrity instilled in whatever relationship I'm in, whether it's with a spouse or a friendship. That has to be there, because for me, rejection is a trigger. Speaking harshly to me is a trigger.
Yeah.
Calling me out or yelling at me is a trigger. And I've learned to say, like, if I'm talking to somebody and they trigger me by yelling at me, I stop and I say, I can't hear you when you're talking to me like that. Doesn't matter who it is. If they're yelling at me or if they're speaking harshly, I stop them and I say, I'm not understanding you right now. So can you bring it down a notch, or can we talk about this in a different way? Because a lot of times people don't understand what your triggers are. So you have to be able to identify them and identify how you're going to speak to somebody and how you're going to make them a little bit more aware, because you're self-aware, but make them aware that how they are treating you at the moment is not necessarily disrespectful, but it's triggering you in a way that you're not. Sometimes you have this ability to check out. So in an effort to change the trigger from a negative into a positive, which I call positive triggers glimmers. So the positive trigger would be, I'm talking to you, you're yelling at me, I shut down because it's a trigger. I express to you, I need you to talk to me in this tone of voice or I check out. Then you get the glimmer trigger, which is they say, okay, it's safe to talk. I'm sorry. Like they apologize or they take accountability. They give you a hug, or they just touch you on the back and they say, we can talk, it's safe. Those are glimmer triggers. So that's why I say, like, the negative and the positive triggers can go hand in hand. It's just a matter of figuring them out. And like I said, I posted something about everyone's hard is different, which we talked about in the first podcast. Everybody's hard is a different level of hard. Same thing, like my trauma is going to be different from somebody else's trauma. So my trauma of being molested and losing my dad and my sister to suicide, and me living homeless, and me having financial struggles, and me going through divorce, those are all considered, can be trauma type things. But somebody else's trauma could literally be something as little as their parents got divorced when they were young, and that's the only thing that they've experienced. If you ask somebody, what's the biggest trauma that's happened in your life? I think I took a poll on our private Facebook group last week of like, what's something that's been traumatic that's happened in your life, and how did you overcome it, or what caused you trauma? And a lot of those answers stemmed from relationships, divorce, or jobs, or financial hardship. So it seems like they always, in a roundabout way, come back to the same three types of things. What I don't think people understand is, my boyfriend and I were just talking about this a little bit ago, and it's interesting to get different perspectives on things. So in some people's viewpoint, our society has become soft, which isn't inaccurate. If you look at the way parents parent their children nowadays, when I was little, it was, do you want the belt to your butt? Do you want your butt beat? Do you want to be grounded for a week? Do you want no communication with anybody? Now it's like, we'll sit the children down and say, now let's talk about this. Why did you do this? And it's a very nice, like almost therapy type session parenting for a lot of parents. And with that being said, some kids are receptive to it and some kids are not. And I think we as parents, and I'm a parent myself with an 18-year-old, and I still have issues with approaching him with certain things because you're afraid of how they're going to take it. And you don't want to be that mean parent. You don't want to be the parent that they resent because you're mean or, you didn't give them what they wanted. So I think as a society and parents, we've become soft to the point that we are allowing our kids to overtake the conversation sometimes because we don't want to be the mean parent. So for instance, I was giving an example earlier. My son's 18. I still pay for a cell phone bill. At what point do you sit your kid down and say, you got to pay for your own cell phone now? You're 18, you have a job, you've got a good head on your shoulders, you're paying for all your other stuff, your gas, your insurance. Like, at what point do you have that conversation and not feel guilty as a parent that you're kind of giving more independence, but you also feel like you're taking something away from them at the same time?
Right. Yeah.
Like, of the fact of not being a parent. So it's one of those things, like, I think too, as parents, we're scared to cause trauma to our kids. Some parents don't care. They cause trauma all the time, but it's like, what is trauma? So when my boyfriend and I were talking about it, it's like, what is trauma? Because the things that we now see as trauma this day and age were not trauma hundreds of years ago.
True.
So it's kind of an interesting fact to get people's different perspectives on what trauma is. But I don't think what people understand what's trauma comes different types of triggers. So people always say, like, the triggers, they usually go more for like the sensory type triggers. So like PTSD, loud noises, okay, flashbacks, for me, sensory trigger, sudden touch. If you come up behind me, my boyfriend makes fun of me. Anybody makes fun of me because you can scare me so easily. If somebody did, I would not be able to protect myself because I get scared so easily. But that's a trigger for me. If you walk up behind me and you touch me all of a sudden, or you walk up behind me and grab me, it is a trigger and I freak out. That's a sensory trigger. Specific smells are sensory. So if you think sensory, like your nose, your ears, your mouth, your eyes, anything that affects those are sensory triggers. Then you have the verbal triggers of being yelled at, criticized, spoken to harshly. There are certain phrases that people can use during trauma that can be verbal triggers. And then you have like your arguments when people get raised voices, that can be a trigger. So kids that have been they've been abused in the home mentally or physically, a lot of times they're getting the finger pointed in their face, or they're getting beaten down, or they're getting yelled at. Those are triggers later on in life that will not help them if they don't learn how to cope with it. It will not help them. And then there's environmental triggers. So I've heard a lot of people say, like, they don't like crowded or confined spaces. They get claustrophobic.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I don't know if those people have experienced trauma in their life that has caused that, or if they've had something traumatic happen. But for me, I know, I have social anxiety along with chronic anxiety. So mine is crowded spaces, but it's not necessarily always a small room. It can be a big event center filled with hundreds of people. And it's a trigger for me because it's a loss of control. People feel like the more people that are surrounding them, the more things that are surrounding them, they lose more control. It's a powerless feeling. And then there's returning to places where trauma happened, or being in a situation that resembles trauma. So, or being around people that can resemble your trauma. So like I said in one podcast, I resented any military men for a long time because of the predator that did what he did to me when I was younger, until I learned that they were not my problem. It was a trigger for me that reminded me of my past because of the uniform. So once I learned how to deal with that trigger and process it and realize it was a trigger and it was part of my trauma, then I could overcome it. So I think a lot of times what is probably my biggest pet peeve is when people say they are triggered from their trauma and they are willing to treat and talk to other people in a certain fashion that is unacceptable based upon the trauma they've been through. They're like, well, I'm sorry, that's just me because I've had a lot of trauma in my life. And it's like, you still shouldn't treat people a certain way because of your trauma. that's something you have to deal with. So that's the whole accountability thing that comes in. And I always say, like, trauma is not your fault, but healing is your responsibility. So whatever's happened to us, it could have totally been out of our control when we were younger, even young, young adulthood. So like me living homeless in my young 20s, that was early, actually not even 20. That was traumatic. And that was because of my choices. So it was my fault. I chose to do that. But at the end of the day, it's my responsibility to overcome the trauma that came from living homeless. And I did deal with that, and took responsibility for it and accountability for it. And I think I'm constantly trying to remind people that growth only happens within yourself when you choose accountability over blaming others. So for many, many years, I've blamed all of those that have caused trauma upon me. I blamed them. I've resented them. I've hated them. They caused me a lot of shame and guilt. But once I took accountability for my own, I guess my own take and my own doing and whatever was a part of that trauma, once I took accountability for those, I was able to move forward. So say, for instance, being molested, I let it go on. I finally had to take accountability in the fact that I let it go on way too long before I finally spoke up. But why did I let it go on way too long? Because I was living in fear of what he would do to me, fear of what he would do to my mother, fear of what he would do to anybody. And then I had to learn that at some point, at 12 years old, I had to overcome that fear to say something and take accountability for me allowing it to go on for so long, so I could finally get rid of that trauma and finally start healing. But I didn't actually start the healing process in a lot of my trauma until I was in my 30s, after I got cancer for the second time, because there's a point in your life where you realize, like, your trauma, there's going to be trauma that's going to happen throughout your life, your entire life. Think of it this way. We live, and nobody has an expiration date. None of us know. We're not like a jug of milk in the fridge and it has an expiration date on it, or we can't smell our bodies and from inside going sour. Like, you just don't know. So at some point, you realize that everyone around you is the same way. Nobody has an expiration date. When you lose somebody to their expiration date, that can cause trauma. If you're a kid that is very close to your parents or your grandparents, or my son is very close to his grandparents, not my side, his dad's side, that will be a traumatic experience for him. And so at some point, you can have all of the people around you want that are your support system and help you get through it, and they're your village. But until you learn how to deal with your own trauma, it's going to sit with you forever. So I always tell people, death is inevitable, where it's going to happen. There's the only way is you have to realize, like, yes, it's traumatic, but nothing anybody says or does is going to make them come back or going to stop you from feeling the way you feel. So I always say, sit in your feelings, feel what you feel, process them, realize that is a traumatic experience in your life for whatever reason, and then find ways to cope with it so that you can still live your life fruitfully for whatever amount of years you have left. Because to sit with the trauma it's not healthy for anybody. For me, I know I have certain triggers that are the negative triggers. So when I notice the negative triggers, I reach for a positive one to try to bring back the glimmer of hope. So for instance, if I have a negative trigger happen, I have songs, like you were saying, I have songs that I can listen to, and it brings back a glimmer. I have a blanket that I love. I have it right now. If I have something that could trigger me potentially, then I have a blanket that I can curl up with, and it's a glimmer. It brings back good memories. Or I have pictures on my phone. If I'm really missing somebody or something, I have pictures on my phone. Like my sister, I've been having a lot of Facebook memories come up lately of my sister and then one of my dogs I had with my previous ex-husband. And so all the while those can be negative triggers, I try to turn them into positives. Like, oh, this was a part in my life that was very happy. It brought me a lot of joy. It brought me a lot of just contentment with where I am at in my life and look how far I've come. And with my sister's death, while it was traumatic for me, and I still have moments that are hard, with that being said, I'm using her death as a positive trigger and glimmer to try to help other people to realize like they're not alone and they have somebody to talk to. And that's the whole purpose of this podcast, is to try to help other people. So I think the trigger thing and trauma is, it's very prevalent, but I don't think I'll ever understand where we got to the point now. Like I was telling my boyfriend, I think we are so focused on figuring out why people think the way they do, why they feel the way they do, having an explanation for everything, justifications for everything, and wondering, comparing apples to oranges. And our society was never really focused as much on it years ago as we are now, which is true. But it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting take to figure out why we're like that. And it's one of those things, are people just becoming more self-aware, or people wanting to actually be better and do better in society? Or is it a social media aspect along with technology? Or is it just the way that society is streamlining and gearing towards all of that? We're becoming more of an emotionally open society. So I don't know. The whole trauma thing is interesting. And I didn't realize until I started doing some research a few years ago, when I was doing research into suicide awareness with my sister, that they say a lot of times, well, first of all, if you have substance abuse and you're already a depressed person or high anxiety ridden person, last thing you should be doing is using drugs or drinking alcohol. Makes it worse. So that leads into, when people do that, they have flashbacks, or they have triggers that happen. People act a certain way or talk a certain way, or they can be at home and be looking at a picture and it can make them sad, and then they go down a certain path. And a lot of times they've also correlated that to people that have served in the armed forces with PTSD. They have triggers, or they have things that happen, or they have relationship strife, and then they drink or they use substances, and then it just compounds the problem. And then there we have that with the whole suicide awareness and things that happen. So I really got into that when my sister passed away and I started learning. I always thought triggers were just like people's voices or seeing certain things, but it's way more than that. You have the, like I said, you have the sensory, and you have anniversary dates. That's another, can be another trigger. You have the environmental factor, verbal factors. You just have a whole bunch of stuff that can be triggers. So it's very important for people to realize what their triggers are. I'm still learning what some of my triggers are. The interesting part is when you try to think about what composed those triggers, like what happened in your life traumatically that caused that trigger, or was it a sequence of events of trauma that happened to cause these triggers? Or do we ourselves cause these triggers? Because a lot of times people are so scared of abandonment and they're scared of rejection. So that can be a trigger. Say I'm an open book. So in a relationship, if you have somebody that's not paying as much attention to you as you'd like, they're not responding as fast, they're not giving you the physical attention you want, they're not emotionally available as you are, they don't show the same love language that you do in the relationship. You can start, if you're somebody that's experienced trauma in a previous relationship via those ways, you can start to feel rejection or abandonment. That's a trigger. Then that causes more problems, to which you somewhat may understand it, but your partner's not going to understand it as much because they may not have experienced the same things you do. So it can make a relationship very non-yin and yang. Like we've talked about before, there's the yin and yang of the opposites that is great for relationships, and it can also be cause significant turmoil, or it can cause strife that doesn't necessarily, it can cause arguments that don't necessarily need to be arguments. It causes misunderstandings that don't need to be misunderstandings if two people can just talk about them and be open-minded and listen to someone's perspective on what's happened to them in their life. I've been with a few people that they haven't experienced a lot of trauma in their life. And I'll tell you that firsthand. Like they've never experienced a car wreck or somebody dying that they were close to, or something significant in their life, like abuse, mentally or physically. So they don't really understand the mentality of people that have, like me, that have experienced a lot of trauma. I was just telling my boyfriend earlier, I got into that really bad car crash going over King Hill, that's towards Boise, Idaho, when I was first out here. And I shouldn't even be alive. I was driving a Chevy Cavalier, and I had a semi sideswipe me and rolled and blacked out and didn't even know where I was at. And I woke up in the hospital, and I guess there was like 20 some cars that stopped to make sure I was okay. I shouldn't even be alive. But now every time we hit that same area going to Boise, as soon as there is a semi that comes near us, I get triggered. And I told him, I said, triggers are not always verbal responses for people, or emotional responses. Sometimes there's non-visible triggers, like trauma response. So mine is my whole body tightens up, my palms get sweaty, and my heart starts racing. Those are all trigger, like trauma responses that are invisible triggers that we don't even, like, people get them all every day. Like if you ever had an instance where you're at work, or say like you lost your job, and you start getting, your heart starts racing, your palms are sweaty, your mind starts racing. That's kind of a trauma response to either the trauma you're experiencing at that moment, or a previous trauma of feeling like either you're not good enough, or you're replaceable, or there's something more to it. And so that's your response to it. And that will probably be a trigger for you at some point with another job, if you feel like your job's on the line, or if you feel like you're not meeting expectations.
Yeah.
So I think people don't realize, like, we are triggered by trauma more than we want to admit. But you have to ask yourself, like, what's trauma? Like, what is your trauma? Because I know you have some trauma because you've lost family members to suicide. You have the trauma of now you just lost a job after 9 years. That would be hard for anybody to go through. So I'm sure you've experienced plenty of trauma just like anybody else. But
yeah,
I guess some of your I guess negative triggers that you could potentially see as positives as well in your life?
I've never looked at it that way, which is funny. Like, it's interesting that you bring that up. That I'm just a negative person by nature because I've had so many things happen to me in the past that I still deal with to this day. And I am one of those people. I know you said it's one of your biggest pet peeves, but I still use my trauma as an excuse to be not a bad person, but just not easy to deal with, right? Just very irritable. I'm quick to get angry. I have a short temper, and I don't get physical. I get loud. Like, I'll yell, I'll cuss, which is not fair to my wife or my kid or anybody else. And that's something that I'm getting treatment for through lens therapy, which I
Yes,
mentioned,
tell me about that. Yeah.
which they call lens therapy or brain mapping, where um, they put sensors on your head and they shoot sound waves to every part of your brain, every lobe, I think I want to say there was 21 parts of the brain that they do that with. And they get to see the signal that it's putting out, and to see how strong your brain actually is, which is the black part of a chart. And I'll put the chart up in post so everybody can see it. And then there's a blue part that shows how it's actually working. And through, I think it's been 5 weeks now, they showed me where I started and they show me where I am now, and it's crazy, like, how different it is. And I've been reacting differently too. I've been less quick to anger. I actually handled being let go fairly well. Typically, I would go scorched earth and just lambaste everybody in the company. I would have a Jerry Maguire moment and just take the fish and tell everybody to F off, and that's it. And I didn't, because I'm very vengeful. I am very hot tempered, and my way I abuse people is I know what their worst fears are or what will trigger them, and I'll say something purposefully that I know is going to make them angry or upset. And that's a horrible thing. That I should not be that way. But
Yeah.
I haven't
But
learned to overcome my trauma like you have. I'm
yeah.
still processing what happened 40 years ago.
But at least you, and from what I gathered from what you just said, at least you're self-aware enough to know
Right.
who you are as a person and how you receive things and then how you respond and react. So you know what I guess is wrong and not justifiable, and you're making the choice to try to make it better or try to make strides towards making it better,
Right.
which says a lot. That's commendable. So that means, I mean, that says a lot about you as a human, that I think you are learning how to deal with your triggers and your trauma more than you are probably giving yourself credit for.
You're probably right.
It's
Yeah.
better than somebody like, I guess, it's like that blanket term, like people like to call everyone a narcissist. But it's like, do we really know what a narcissist is? Because if you watch, there's so many videos out there about narcissists, and it's like you start thinking like, maybe I'm a narcissist.
I think we're all a little bit
Yeah, because
in
there's
our own
things
way.
out there. I mean, they say, well, if you do this, you're a narcissist, but if you don't do this, you're not a narcissist. And it's like,
Right.
so I think we have a lot of blanket terms out there for different types of personality types.
Absolutely.
But I think, and at the end of the day, for me personally, if I see somebody actually making a conscious effort to try to be better, try to be more understanding, try to be more compassionate, try to be more self-aware, try to make strides towards a positive direction in their life, whether it be with themselves or towards others or how they treat or talk to others, that says a lot about that person, because none of us are perfect at the end of the day, but at least they're trying to make an effort to be better. So I'm not perfect. I have so many triggers. Like when I was writing down all these different types of triggers today, just to re-rack my brain on what triggers are, I'm like, oh my gosh, I could have all of these just based on being molested as a kid.
Yeah.
But the difference is there's only a certain amount of triggers now that I can actually say are truly triggers for me versus all of them being triggers for me, because I've learned how to cope with the other ones, or I've just completely gotten around them to where they don't bother me as much. But if you want to go even deeper, there's triggers such as certain sounds and certain movies I can't watch because they are triggers. Because when I was being molested, what would he do? He'd turn on the TV, turn it up loud, and he would turn on a movie or a TV show so nobody could hear me crying or screaming for help or saying nothing.
Wow.
So there are certain shows and there's certain movies, and there's people that are like, why don't you like that movie? That's a great movie. I don't like that movie.
What do you got against Happy Gilmore?
Yeah, well, how come you don't want to watch the movie? I don't want to watch that movie. Well, how come you don't like so-and-so actress? Yeah. I just don't like her. And people will push, especially people I've been with, they will push and push and push to get an answer out of you. And it's like, sometimes when you have a trigger, you don't necessarily have a defined answer, or you're so ashamed you don't want to give a defined answer, because then you got to get into the details. And,
and you don't want to relive it.
When you're traumatized, you don't really want to go back to that because you're trying to grow out of it. It's something that I always say. It's the same thing with things that happen to you. Don't ever forget, but you can forgive so you can move on with your life. So I don't think that any of us have the ability to just flat out forget everything bad that's ever happened to us. I think we hold on to bits and pieces. And then I think there's people like me, we had so much traumatizing things happen when we were little that we've blocked out so much of the good. And we've kind of taken those good core memories out and only remembered the bad because so much bad happened. And we've lived and succeeded and found strength and getting past the bad. So for me, reminding myself of how strong I am and how resilient I am, and what I'm capable of is me going, look at all this garbage I went through. I can get through this too. So you use your bad trauma as a positive, again, glimmer to get through whatever it is you're going through now. But I just think that people, I don't think, in all honesty, out of all the people I've talked to about things they've gone through, I've had people message me since we started this podcast about things they're going through, and life is hard, and they have things they're going through financially, mentally, emotionally. And they're like, I'm so sorry to burden you. I'm so sorry. You have all your own stuff going on. I don't need to. And I'm like, no, it's perfectly fine. We all have things going on all the time. There's always something going on. Anybody that tells you their life is great and everything's great, my life is so great
Yeah.
all the time. I'm like, there's no way. There is no way that somebody's life is that perfect all the time.
But
Even
it's
people-
good listening to other people's problems because it takes you out of your own head.
Yes. And there are people that I know a few people that they are very successful. They're very wealthy. But if you ask them if they're actually truly happy, they will tell you no, because they are so lonely. They don't have the support system that other people have, because they don't know who their true friends are or who's actually truly there for them, or if they're there for their money or their success to kind of step ladder off of them, or use them as a stepping stone for their own success in their career or their personal life, or the rubbing elbows with who you know.
Yep.
So sometimes the most wealthiest people are the saddest people as well, which gets back to, like when, let's say Robin Williams died, that was very traumatic for me. That was traumatic for me. He's not only a good actor, but he was one of those people, happy all the time, bringing life to the stage, making everybody laugh. Nobody had any clue that he had all of this turmoil going on within his own head. And then he dies. And you're sitting there going, what the heck? I thought his life was so great. So that leads back to the point of what also I've said in the podcast is we never know what somebody is going through.
Yep.
So we should always try to be less judgmental and more kind to other people, because even though somebody on the outside might seem like they have it all together, they've never experienced trauma. What could possibly be wrong in their life? They're such a happy person. They have it all going on. They have a good job. They got a great family, kids, money, the cars, that they go do trips. They still could be experiencing trauma in some way. And I think Robin Williams is a good testament to that. He was experiencing trauma within his own head from whatever he had going on. And so I think the word trauma is kind of like one of those, I want to say, Band-Aid labels of, well, I just had a lot of trauma when I was going on. Okay, well, what was the trauma? What caused the trauma? And why is it still a trauma to you? So to me, how I've learned to cope with the trauma that's happened in my life is, instead of looking at it as trauma anymore, because they were traumatic, I look at them as life lessons that have made me who I am today and have helped me grow into an individual that's probably a little more sensitive, empathetic, and compassionate and genuine more than the average person, which along with that can come more issues. But I think everything that we go through in life changes us to a certain velocity. So not to spoil future episodes, but we secured a guy yesterday out of Florida that will be on a future episode. And this guy's story, when you guys hear it, is unbelievable. I showed my boyfriend the email and he's like, this is this guy now? And I'm like, yeah, he's been through a lot.
A lot.
And a lot. And I read, it's like what you did with me. You're like, oh, I won't ever complain again after hearing your story of your childhood. That's how I felt when I read this guy's story. I'm like, oh my gosh, I will never complain about having cancer twice again in my life. This guy is incredible. And he's so successful now and he's amazing. And I can't wait to have him on the show. That's been my biggest thing in trying to secure guests on the show, which I'm sorry to everybody that we weren't able to have O'Shea on tonight. He would have been great. But I think my biggest thing is when I reach out to people to try to get them on the show is it's like, hey, look, the show isn't just about, trauma or mental health are focusing on the negatives in life, we also want to use your story as a positive to turn it around and help people realize that they're not alone and make a difference in our communities and across the nation. And we want to also help people to understand that we're all a little screwed up. I want to be honest. Like, everybody has their flaws to a fault, and everybody has things that we're constantly striving to work on. And when you get to that point, when you're, and getting close to your last breath or your last years in life, it's sad that we wait until then to look back on our life and be proud of ourselves with everything we went through, or to reminisce and think about everything we've been through and everything we accomplished and how we affected people's lives. I always say that the part between the beginning and the end, that dash, that's what's the most important in creating your legacy as a person, is that dash. How do you want people to remember you? Mm-hmm. What do you want people to say about you, not just to your face, but behind your back? And what kind of memories do you want to create with people? So I constantly get made fun of because it's like, another picture. Well, if something happens tomorrow to me, what do you got with me? You have, you have your brain for memories, but don't you want photos to remind yourself, or videos? Or I think that's one thing I love about social media the most is people look, I do it too, but we look at Facebook memories as like, oh my God, thanks for reminding me of that. That's great. Yeah. But sometimes it can be really good too, because it can remind you of everything you've experienced or things that you've went through, and can also be very beneficial. I can tell you one thing, I'm way closer with way more people from social media than I am in real life. That's sad to say, but that's also very, for me, I feel honored, one, and two, I feel very humbled, because that means people that haven't even spent 2 minutes in a room with me personally have respect for me and care. There's people that actually do care, and I know I'm not alone. I could reach out to these people and talk to them if I needed to without judgment or criticism, and they're not going to run amok and tell everyone. So I think there's benefits to trying to bring a community of people together in a big support team, which is what I'm trying to do with this podcast, is make people realize like you're not alone. We've all, specifically with things we've talked about already, like with me and you, when I talked to you, I had no idea that you had that much loss in your family with suicide. So there's times where I'm like, has anybody else ever experienced more than 2 people in their immediate family commit suicide in the same exact way in their lifetime? Mm-hmm. And then I hear people like you, and then I had a few other people reach out after that episode, and I'm like, wow, I'm really not alone. Yeah. So I think it's good that we're bringing people together like that. And I'm really excited for some of the guests that we're going to have on, because it's going to be a whole mixed hodgepodge of things. Like I said earlier, I was going to announce next week's guest. And so I'm very excited to have this lady on. She's a PWBA bowler. She was featured in the Bowler's Journal magazine last year. So when you go to nationals, you can sign up for the Bowler's Journal free. They send it to you. They did an article in there with her, and she suffered severe anxiety and has suffered panic attacks. Recently had one not too long ago again. She's back out on the lanes and competing, and I'm super proud of her. I'm very honored to have her on the show. I went to go message her to be on our show a couple weeks ago, and lo and behold, my message from last June when she was in the Bowler's Journal popped up. I was like, oh my gosh, my message to her is still there, and her response was still there. And I never thought in a million years she'd respond to me last time, and she did. And I was just straightforward with her. I said, look, I bowl, and I've experienced anxiety on the lanes. I've had panic attacks. I've did this, and your article resonated with me so much, and you're very inspiring and motivational. So when I reached out to her, it was a no-brainer to come on our show. So I don't know if many people know her, but Heather Sterner, that's who's going to be on the show. Her husband's Jason Sterner. He bowls PBA. He's very, they're very interesting. They're New Yorkans, yeah. But they're just very humble, like very down to earth, average your average human being that you would not know, even that her husband, I mean, he's been on TV, he's been a part of some big things in the PBA, and you would never know. They're just very genuine people. And I'm very happy that somebody else is willing to share their story with anxiety. Because when I first started experiencing that as an athlete, I thought I was crazy. I thought maybe this sport isn't meant for me. Maybe my triggers from my trauma are causing me to not be able to compete athletically in a professional standpoint. And then I started talking to more and more professional athletes, and it's more prevalent than we think it is. Even with your average league bowler, I mean, there's people that sweat it out going to league. So
True.
yeah, that's Mike. So thanks for the comment, Mike, but he's right. So we do have a choice every day to how we respond to different situations, either positively or negatively. And
because you can only control yourself. You can't control others. You can only
at all. Yeah,
right.
I've talked about this extensively with many people. Like I can say what I want, say how I feel. I can't control how they're going to react to me or how they're going to say. You can most definitely make someone feel you can make someone feel emotion.
You can manipulate somebody to get
Yes,
the
you
response
can,
that you want.
very
Sure.
much so.
Yeah.
But you, at the end of the day, you control how you react to someone's actions or words.
Right.
How you want. Like we talked last week about bullying. So I very much am in charge of how I react to someone's bullying towards me, and allowing them to win by them pushing me out of a bowling facility in tears and making me call it quits on a tournament or whatever because of the bullying. That was me responding in a negative way to how they were acting towards me. So my reaction was not beneficial or conducive in a way to me that was going to benefit me in any way. So I very much could have reacted in a different way.
It's the reaction that they were going for.
Yeah, I got the reaction. Yes, I let them win. So I let them win, and I learned a hard lesson from that.
Well, it's no fault of your own. I mean, you're human. I mean,
It's human. I think it's human for anybody that, when somebody hurts your feelings, or when somebody, especially if you have, it's even worse if you have an emotional attachment to somebody, or if you care for somebody or love somebody, when they treat you or talk to you a certain way, your reactions tend to be a little more impulsive.
Of course.
Than taking a step back and thinking about, okay, how am I going to react to this? In that setting, it's not people I really should even care what they think. My reaction was impulsive when I should have taken a step back and go, okay, look, what's the source? Consider the source, consider how they treat you and other people, and then take that into account and just roll with it and move forward.
Do you even know why they were doing that to you?
I really don't know. You have that the generalized opinion of everyone, they're just jealous, or you worked really hard to get what you have and where you're going. So that's what it is. They want it given it to them because they're just a good house shot bowler. So they think things should just be handed to them.
Right.
So I looked at it in a way as of like sad.
It is.
Very, very sad that you want to spend your time putting me at your table that I'm not sitting at and making me the highlight of your night. Like, it's almost kind of, if you look at it, it's almost kind of a compliment. So a compliment in a way that I'm not sitting at your table, but you're giving me a free chair to sit there, and you want to make your whole night or your conversation, you want me to be your conversation piece. Fine. Have at it. Whether it's negative or positive, you're still talking about me.
That's true.
So
That's true.
my name's still going through your mouth. So actually they're doing themselves a disservice if they really don't like somebody. If a bully doesn't like somebody that much, they're talking about them, and you're that important that you're still filtering and you're taking up space in their head, that I think says more about them than it does you. There's something with you that draws you to them in a certain sense. So, and I'm not going to say I'm not guilty. I've had times where, I've said things about somebody or people before back, and being an immature individual. Sometimes it's not just immaturity, it's being a very insecure individual. So, and that all relates back to, like I said, trauma. Not that it's, like I said before, not that it's an excuse, but I think when you're younger and you're told you're never given any positive feedback, it's always, what are you doing wrong? and then you have stuff shoved in your face that you could do better, or you have that sense of rejection and abandonment, when you're an adult and you're around other adults and you feel rejected because you're not part of the in group, or people put off that facade that they don't like you or they talk about you, you feel rejection. So that brings out a trigger, which causes a response, which is a negative response usually, which causes you to then what? Be a bully back or say things back that aren't so nice.
Yep.
So those are the mistakes I've made. Oh, you're going to talk about me? I'm going to talk about you. It doesn't help anybody, really.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
So once I realized that was kind of a trigger response, where I said I learned a hard lesson this last year. Once I learned that was a trigger response for me, I sort of changed my perspective on how I'm going to treat those situations from now on. It's not always going to be like, I'm the bigger person, I'm going to walk away and not say anything. It's going to be like, no, I'm going to face this dragon head on, and I'm going to walk up to them. And if I hear them say it out loud, I'm going to walk up to them and ask them, what is your issue with me? Do you have a problem? Do we need to talk about something? Because I think really the only real way we're going to get around people, I guess, getting reprimanded. I don't know if that's a correct word, but
yeah, because they're not expecting you to challenge.
Yeah, them. I think, or maybe let's just say facing the consequences of their actions.
Right.
So I think what it would be is if somebody has the audacity, or they have the ability to talk about somebody, then you should be able to call them out on their actions and make them suffer the consequences by calling them out and asking them, what's your problem with me? And if they can't answer you flat out, then there's your answer right there. They're just doing it to be mean. They're not doing it for any specific reason. But if somebody were to tell me, well, it's because you said this or you acted like this, then I would say, okay. And that's where the growth comes, by taking accountability instead of blame shifting. You're taking the accountability to apologize for whatever actions it's what you said or did at some point in time, to apologize to them and make amends and make things better. But if people are just being like that to be like that, then that's their own thing. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I've had things happen in my life where I've not been such a nice person, and I used my trauma as an excuse to be a crappy human being, to be someone that was insecure with my own body or who I am as a female, to treat other females disrespectfully and not give them even an ounce of a chance to get to know me or to get to know them. And I've treated them like crap, or I've put judgment upon them based off something about them triggered me from my past to react that way. So, and there's still to this day, there's certain things I don't understand why I'm like that with certain females. There's just certain females that rub me wrong. And I've always said, like, I have a gut instinct and I have a women's intuition. And that's partially true. But then there's been women that have proved me wrong, where I was very wrong about them. And for that, I self-apologize at that point, because you're not going to walk up to somebody and be like, oh, I thought these nasty things about you and you're totally different. What you should do is self-apologize to yourself and be like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't have done that because that's so rude. How would I feel if somebody did that to me and treated me like that based off something they heard about me, or because I act or talk or think a certain way, they think something about me that's not necessarily true. Because like you said, no two people are the same ever. So we kind of have to take our wins and our losses there. But I think I think this is great to talk about, because I think trauma plays a lot bigger role in our everyday living than people want to admit.
Oh, absolutely. It literally affects everybody. Like nobody, like you said, nobody has a perfect life. Every single person on this planet has had something bad happen to them, or emotionally responsive. Something that's responsible for giving them, for triggering them, for having bad responses to a sound, a smell, a word, a tone, being yelled at. Nobody's immune to that. And with the advent of social media, it's made for more trouble, because people can just sit behind a phone or a keyboard and say whatever they want with no repercussions to somebody they don't even know.
Yeah.
And it happens daily. You can literally go to any thread on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever, and you will see people arguing to total strangers about something that shouldn't affect their daily life, has nothing to do with them personally, but get triggered by something somebody says or something somebody does or a video they saw. It's remarkable how much hatred there is.
Yeah.
And social media has brought that to the forefront. So
And a
before
lot of
that,
times the hatred's from a measly maybe 10% you know of about the person or the subject or what's being put out there. You don't know the whole story.
yeah. Hey, Tim.
Hi, Tim. I always say trauma can explain someone's behavior, but it doesn't justify it.
That's good. That's good. That's a good point.
Yeah. So like it can explain, like, say you're harsh towards somebody, you're very a brash person, you're very in their face, very blunt. So your trauma can explain that behavior because that's a control power feeling for you. It makes you feel in control of the conversation. It makes you feel more superior. It makes you feel like you're being heard by either raising your voice or being direct with somebody. But it doesn't justify it to be okay to be that type of person as somebody.
Sure.
All the time. Like there's a time and a place to be stern with somebody and be like, look, we've talked about this 10 times. Like my boss at one point, we've talked about this 3 different times. Like, what are you not getting? That's a point when it's necessary.
Right. Yeah.
It's either I'm not paying attention or I'm not getting it. It's not that I'm stupid. It's just like maybe I wasn't understanding what he was saying, and so he needed to communicate it differently. Or for me to take him seriously, he had to communicate it in a stern voice, which is what that was, because I wasn't taking him seriously the first couple times. But if you're just being like that to be like that because you've had trauma in your life, so you think you can be a butthole, it doesn't justify it that it's acceptable behavior towards another human being. So I think for me, like going back to the movie thing, okay, there's been people I've been with that they're like, let's watch this movie. And I'm like, no, I don't want to watch that movie. I don't want to watch that movie. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to look at that actress. I don't want anything. To this day, I cannot watch a movie with Angelina Jolie at all. She's a trigger. It's a trigger. Yeah. I can't. And no matter how great her movies are, I can't watch it. And I've heard Mr. and Mrs. Smith was great, and all these movies that she's been in were great. I can't watch it. So for me, it's not fair for me to keep other people from enjoying something that they want to take joy in life or be a part of because it's a trigger for me. So it's either I've got to find a way to cope with it and be like, look, it's just a movie. It's not, there's nothing behind it. Like I have to learn to cope with it, or I'm going to starve myself of having any type of substance in any type of relationship with the opposite sex or as a friendship either too. So like you said, and we were talking earlier, environmental triggers. So for me, I am scared of the dark. At 42 years old, I'm still scared of the dark. I will literally turn off the hall light and race to the bedroom to get in bed. And when I'm left home alone to stay home alone, it's even more of a trigger for me. So I have to always have a door cracked and a little light on or something. Those are triggers I've realized are triggers that will be lifelong triggers. And so I've learned ways to cope with them. But for me, I also have to learn, you have to learn a new way when you're around people to navigate the triggers from trauma as well. Because otherwise you're really going to deprive yourself of having a happy life and having great relationships with people and being the best version of you. I don't think if I would have found a way to cope with some of these or to be more self-aware of what my triggers were, I think I would have had a miserable life because I would have based my life around my triggers and my trauma. And that would be miserable for anybody. That would be, like I've told you before, mental misery. Yeah. When I get debilitating anxiety, that's exactly what my entire life would have been for the rest of my life. It would have been mental misery and debilitating because let's face it, like if you have these horrific life experiences, instead of looking at them as a way of like, it's been a hard life and life's been rough and I just had it so bad, so I'm allowed to feel this way all the time and be a horrible person or feel so bad and be so insecure and be super sensitive and be mad at the world and mad at life. I look at it as like, wow, look at all the crap I've been through and I'm still here.
That's
Like I'm
true.
still making it. So
Yeah.
I really try to help when people reach out to me. I try to really get them to realize, like, I know you're having a bad day or you've had a bad week or you've had a bad couple months, but you got to have some faith. And when you say faith, people instantly turn to religion. What I mean by faith is you've got to have some faith in yourself that what you've gone through right now, look at all the other stuff you've gone through that you didn't think you would make it through, and you made it through and you're still here. So you'll get through this too. It doesn't seem like it's possible at the moment. It doesn't seem like you're capable, but somehow we as humans always find a way to make it through to the next thing. We always find a way to cope. We always find a way to gather ourselves enough to have enough strength to make it through and push through another day, no matter what comes our way. We always find a way to figure out who our support system is if we have one, to reach out. And if you think you don't have one, you do have somebody, like we talked about in the last podcast. But I think the biggest thing with trauma is just becoming self-aware. I'm sure, I mean, I know somebody else who she's lost a couple of sons. And she's been going through some rough times. She'll probably listen to this podcast at some point. You know, I'm talking about her, but I know she's having a rough time right now. And there have been times I don't know what to say to her. And there's a lot of times where I'm like, oh, I always have something to say to somebody and try to help them in some way. But there's sometimes those trauma for some people, you really don't know what to say. You just have to be there for them. And at some point, I told her, there will be a day at some point, something will click for you and you will realize that all of this loss you've experienced and all the hardship and everything that you've gone through will turn you into the best version of you that you could possibly imagine, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. And your trauma, the pain from your trauma, will turn into something positive for your future. And I just kind of let her sit and meddle in that one, because she's got to find a way to combat the trauma responses that she's having and the triggers, because it's literally making some days for her outright miserable, and she doesn't want to do anything or go anywhere. And so those are the kind of people that you kind of have to like help them along and push them, give them a little bit of a positive push towards the right direction, so they are not sitting there and stewing on their own with everything that's going on. So I think we all need to be a little bit better about helping each other and be a little bit more understanding and compassionate. And when we converse with people, just realize that I always preach this, but the actions mean more than words, but we should still make sure that our words are palpable to somebody to help them be a little bit better. So yeah, I don't know. I know that there's all types of internal triggers that we can experience too. So, and like I said, there's those invisible triggers that we have. So I do have a question for you. Like the day that you messaged me that you got let go from your job after 9 years, I can't imagine what that would feel like, because I've been at mine 3, and I'm like, if they ever came in and told me I didn't have a job anymore, I don't know how I would react. I don't know what my response would be. But do you feel any part of you on that day, or even when you went home or the days following, that you had any triggers happen that you could correlate that felt similar from previous traumatic events in your life that you've experienced?
Yeah, honestly, they said it wasn't because of any merit or anything. it had nothing to do with my performance. They were restructuring and terminating my position and giving what I do to basically 3 or 4 people, which had happened with the previous job that I was at for 7 years. They laid me off before Christmas and pretty much told me the same thing, but it still made me feel like I wasn't good enough. Like, okay, yeah, I'm 49 years old. I make a lot of money. Obviously, when new management comes in and sees that, I'm just a number.
Yeah.
Why is this guy making this? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, honey. Okay, we'll be done soon. 10 minutes. My daughter. Anyway, but yeah, I felt like I wasn't good enough because obviously there's some way that they could have said, "Hey, we are thinking of eliminating your position. Would you be adverse to going into a different role or possibly taking a pay cut now? And when business gets better, we could possibly go back, revisit your salary later on." No, they didn't even think about that. They showed no loyalty to somebody that had been there for 9 years. Was the
Yeah.
very first employee that opened up a branch in the Nashville market and had seen 3 different terminal managers come and go, had seen 4 different regional managers come and go, countless employees come and go, and I was the only constant holding things together. Yeah, I was a little bit disappointed because I felt like it was nothing that I did personally. Like, I had put everything on the line for the company and done everything to try to keep the office afloat. Which goes back to when my parents got divorced and my mom left me to be with somebody else and went and moved away, 30 minutes away, and I stayed with my dad. I felt like I wasn't good enough to her. Like, I'm her son. I should be more important than any other relationship with any other person that she has. So whenever life events come up like that, I always revert back to when I had that first rejection, when that first happened, when my mom
Yeah.
left.
Yeah.
And I've prayed on it. I've gone to counseling. Like I said, I'm doing the lens therapy. I'm trying to do whatever I can to forgive her for that, which I still haven't done. And forgive myself for feeling that way,
Yeah.
because at 49 years old, that happened when I was 12. I shouldn't still be dealing with this later on, but I
Yeah.
still am. So yeah, when I do lose my job, or a couple times where I laid off that had nothing to do with my performance, it still makes me feel like I wasn't good enough for them to figure out a way to keep me.
So on a positive spin with that, um, your fear of rejection. So we talked about fear of rejection, and rejection being a trigger for you. I found that rejection is one of my triggers as well. And the positive spin on that is, when you're someone that is fearful of rejection or it's a trigger, it actually makes you someone that is willing to give your all, whether it be at work or in a relationship. You're willing to give your all and sacrifice everything that you can to make something work and to make to the benefit of someone else's happiness and to see other people succeed. So I think that's not necessarily a bad, in a way, let's think of it as a positive trigger. So the positive trigger of you feeling rejection, and if you spin it, is that you are probably more of a selfless person and more giving and more compassionate than most people, because you don't want other people to feel what rejection feels like. And you don't want to feel rejection, say, from your spouse. So you're going to give her all your best efforts in any way, shape, or form possible. You're going to be a little bit more compassionate, and you're going to try your hardest to make things work because you don't want to feel rejected. Because believe it or not, whether we have someone leave us or we leave somebody, it's still a form of rejection. Because if you leave somebody in a friendship or a relationship or a job, you're still rejecting that person, and you're rejecting yourself in a sense, because you're rejecting the ability to give yourself to somebody else in a way that would curtail any rejection happening. So I think even though you feel rejected by your mother, which I think you do need to probably forgive her for that and forgive yourself for whatever you're feeling in those ways, your fear of rejection with, job loss, whether it be this one or one down the road, or any friendship or marriage or anything like that, you can spin it as a positive. Okay, well, me having that sense of rejection, what do I positively bring to the table because of the rejection? It makes, to me, all of our triggers can also be good in a positive way, where they make us a better human in certain ways, in certain aspects. So when I'm listening to you talk, I think sometimes we need to listen to ourselves talk. That's why a lot of times I will journal. I told you I have like a little notebook in my phone, and if I have thoughts, I'll journal it out.
Yeah.
If I'm mad at somebody, I will sit there and write a whole paragraph. Like I'm going to send it and I'm going to tell them off. But if I journal it and then I reread it, I'm like, look how awful that looks, or how
Right.
awful
Yeah.
that sounds, or like,
True.
what am I thinking?
True.
And then I try to spin it as a positive of like, okay, I wrote the paragraph, I read it, I deleted it. What did I learn from it? I was being a little bit too sensitive, or I was thinking about this wrong, or maybe this was, a feeling that is justifiable. But is it something worth bringing to the table to cause an extra issue because I'm feeling a certain way, even though that person may not have consciously or in being had intention of making me feel that way or causing those issues? Maybe it was me having a trauma response, which caused a trigger, which caused me to feel that way, that person would have no idea that I even felt that way for that reason. So that's why, to me, journaling has been a huge coping mechanism for me. And like you said, there's sometimes I share things on Facebook. Like I shared a post today, actually, and it talked about the hard, like someone's hard may not be another person's hard. That is me strictly journaling, because there's been times lately I've caught myself, I'm like, what are they spazzing about? Like, that's nothing. But to them, that's their hard.
Yeah.
And so for you to walk up to somebody, and I had somebody message me today after they read my post, and they're like, they would send me a bunch of clapping hands, like, thank you so much, because I had somebody, they saw me crying, and they were like, what's so hard about that? Like, and made her feel really insignificant. Like her problem was not a problem.
Like her feelings don't matter.
And that, yes. And I think that's the worst thing that we can do to people, is be insensitive to their needs or their feelings, because we don't feel the same things that they do, or we don't see things the same way that they do. So just because I have a trigger and I react or feel a certain way doesn't make it justifiable for somebody else to belittle me and make me feel bad because I'm feeling a certain way based upon my trigger. They didn't experience my life. They didn't experience everything I've been through. But at the same time, I think some people hold on to trauma so long that they're not doing, yes, like you, they're not doing themselves any favors by holding on to the trauma.
Yeah.
So as crazy as it sounds, I was mad at my biological father forever for killing himself when I was 5.
Right.
Like, you gave me no sense of a dad, a biological dad, all growing up, even though I had an amazing stepdad. After all that happened at 13, 14, 15, all through middle school, high school years, amazing stepdad. I still had so much anger toward my biological dad that when I would go see families and people I was in school with, their moms and dads biologically, and I would get so angry. I'm like, my dad ruined that experience for me. Like, my dad won't be able to see me get married or graduate. Mm-hmm. I had this awesome stepdad, but I was belittling him because of a trauma that happened to me when I was little that I didn't understand. So it took me a lot of years to get over that trauma. And then once you get over a trauma, I had another trauma happen, and then another trauma happened. Yeah. And then you get cancer. That's a trauma. And then you get in remission, and then you get it again. That's a trauma. Yeah. So I think what people fail to realize is that we go through trauma more often than not, but some just stick with us more than others. But like you said, with the trauma with your mother that's caused you to feel that rejection, I think there's got to be a way for you, whether it's the lens therapy or whatever, to kind of overcome that trauma so you can move forward with your life and not just forgive her for whatever it's made you feel in your life, but forgive yourself as well. So you can stop living underneath of that Band-Aid of trauma that you're trying to protect yourself from. That's basically what we're doing, is we're putting a Band-Aid over our own feelings. We don't want to rip the Band-Aid off because we don't want to revisit the trauma and try to move forward. So I always say, like, you just got to rip the Band-Aid off, deal with the trauma, and move forward, or you're never going to be truly a happy person, which, you know, a lot of us, there's days where we're happy and there's days where they're not so good, and that's just life.
Yep.
But if you constantly are in turmoil because of your trauma and you're using your trauma as an excuse to be in turmoil, or the pity me, like I use my mother, for instance. She's a pity me, cry wolf so many times, nobody wants to listen to it now. And she uses her trauma as an excuse to behave the ways that she's behaved my entire life and do the things that she's done and held on. And then the pain pills, and then the doctor's appointments, and the woe is me, and the pity me, and I'm not going to do anything to benefit my life. I'm not going to do anything to change my life. That is living in your trauma. You're basically living in a pool of trauma and you're drowning and there's no way out. So
it's almost like she's gotten used to misery, and
yes, misery loves company. And if you want to live in misery, that's to each their own. But no one, I don't feel like anybody should ever have to live in misery, especially every day of their life. We have miserable days. I always say, it's a bad day. It's not a bad life. You don't have a bad life. You're just having a bad day.
Sure.
Like there's so many, if we would sit and focus more on the positives that life brings to us, I think we all as humans would be much better off in the long run. So yes, you have to, I hope the lens therapy helps you. Speaking of lens therapy, I got to remember his name. There's a guy here locally that does neurotherapy, which I believe is pretty similar to the lens therapy you're going through. And I want to get in touch with him to see if we can get him on the podcast and talk about it, because it is definitely streamlined with helping people with anxiety and depression and trauma trigger responses. Like it's all encompassed together. And I've noticed too, since I've done some groundwork on trying to be self-aware of my triggers, it has helped my anxiety too, to a point. So there's things that were triggers that would cause my anxiety to be super, super bad. And those triggers now, like I said, that's what it was. I have the anxious attachment style. So there's the avoidant and there's the anxious attachment style. Anxiety reminded me of it because the ANX. But anxious attachment style is what I have. So if I message somebody and I don't hear back, especially if it's somebody that I'm romantically involved with, that anxious attachment style comes out, and that's a trigger for me. And then it will spin me out of control with anxiety. So I've learned now, I'm very self-aware that that's a trigger. And so sometimes I have to take a step back and go, okay, well, let's think realistically. Are they working? Are they busy? Did they have a busy day? Like, it's not always, did they get in a car crash? Are they mad at me? Something happened? Are they going to break up with me? Like, instead of going to all the negatives, you have to try to kind of more take a realistic approach. And that's where it doesn't matter who it is, but communication styles are huge, but also communicating period are huge. So relationships or friendships, or even with your job, like the way people communicate. I've always said it's better to be an over communicator than an under communicator, because at least over communicating, you know what people's intentions are, you know where they're at with their day, you know what's going on. You have a true, you have a ground level of a baseline understanding of what's going on, versus just being very vague or very closed off. That doesn't really help. So for me, I'm very straightforward. I'm like, hey, I have an anxious attachment style. These are my triggers. I need to be able to communicate with you on a level that's going to make me feel safe and comfortable. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to just feel safe. They want to feel safety and they want to feel secure with anything, just like a job. You know, you want to feel safe and you want to feel secure with your job, which unfortunately, some of that stuff's a little bit out of our hands. So we can only do the best we can do in every facet of life and just hope that it reaps rewards later. And if not, then we move on to the next thing. So I think for me, this was very enlightening because I was able to go back through some notes that I'd written down a long time ago and forgot I had them, about triggers and trauma. And I think it's great because it's kind of eye-opening to talk about it. I hope we are able to help somebody out there that's maybe experiencing some trauma or hasn't been able to get over it. I know there's veterans lately I've talked to that have severe PTSD or have some, and they are very, very closed off individuals. They have a lot of trauma. And those are the types of people that they really have to work, I think, twice as hard to get through some of the trauma that they've been through, more so than I would have to. I'm trying to get a couple of people that are veterans that have suffered PTSD or have suffered in some way, shape, or form to come on the show, just to give us, I guess, a little bit better perspective on where all that.
There's so many that deal with that. I would really love that because
Yeah, I'm trying
huge.
really hard. There's one I'm really trying hard to get to come on the show, but they're super hard to get a hold of.
Yeah.
So I'm trying, but I just want to see from a different perspective, because there's different levels of PTSD trauma too.
Sure.
Like I told you on the first episode, I was clinically diagnosed with CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder that is caused specifically by childhood trauma. So there's PTSD out there that's caused by specifics, and the way to overcome them, the way I've overcome mine or have learned to cope with it, is significantly different than those that have fought in war. And so I'm just kind of intrigued on how somebody has learned to cope with it a little bit. So,
which is why I completely right now believe in lens therapy. Like, I don't think it's just a gimmick. Like, I'm seeing the changes in my mother-in-law who first did it, who got riddled with anxiety in her 60s. Just never had that issue. But all of a sudden we're having panic attacks. Felt like she was going to have a heart attack because it was such a panic attack, and such a strong Christian, and would just be on her knees praying every single day, Lord, why is this happening to me? And nothing was getting better. And her thoughts were getting darker and darker and darker. And she's one of the most positive people I've ever met in my life. Found the lens therapy. My wife actually did research on it and found it and suggested to her. And she's like, I've tried everything else. She didn't want to take medication because she didn't want to feel different. She didn't want to feel tired or woozy, or she didn't want her brain. How can I say? She just didn't want to have that kind of reaction to it, because there's a lot of anti-anxiety meds that will make you tired or make you sleepy or make you drowsy or make you kind of feel like you're high. She didn't want to deal with any of that. So, like Xanax and stuff like that. So she tried it and she went through it for 12 weeks and she's completely changed. So that's what made me decide to do it. And if this truly works, I'm about 5 weeks in, so I got 7 weeks to go. I would suggest it for everybody, especially for like veterans.
I would be interested to actually, if the person doing it for you is willing to come on the podcast to talk about it.
Sure, I can find out.
Yeah, I would be interested, and that's another reason I'm really excited for Heather to come on the show next week, because one, it's huge. I mean, it's huge because it'll not only help me hearing it from somebody else that's dealt with some of the same things I have with, but I don't think people understand how hard it is to be very raw and vulnerable about anxiety or depression or panic attacks. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts to step up to the plate and talk about it and be honest. And so I give her huge accolades for her willingness to do it. And not just for our podcast. I mean, she's talked about it openly on her Facebook, and she did the article in the Bowler's Journal, which is where I saw it at. But it takes a lot because, like I said, there's a lot of people that deal with it. And since we've started this podcast, I've had more people reach out to me than I had before. And I had people reach out to me before about stuff that they deal with. And, I've had one person in particular, like I've been on meds for 10 years and they just make me feel numb. That's all they do. It's not helping me. I still have thoughts, but it's just subdued them a little bit more. And I don't want to take medicine. And so it's one of those things where I think we are so overly medicated as society. And I always say, like, working out is the cheapest form of an antidepressant you can get.
It's true.
Any type of working out and eating healthy, like what we put in our bodies can affect our mental state as well and how we feel about ourselves. So
there's a lot of money between chemicals and food and big pharma
yeah,
and all
yes.
that.
And
We could do a whole show.
Big pharma is making out big time with.
Yes.
Where as a society, I think we're becoming more open to discussion about mental health and being more aware of it. But the feeding factor has always been, let's just see what medication works for you because it's a chemical imbalance. And it's like, sometimes it's not always that. Sometimes you can be deficient in something. Sometimes it can be your lifestyle that you need a lifestyle change for. Sometimes it can be your trauma that you've had, like for instance, with me as a child and a young adult, that you haven't quite learned how to filter through it all yet and cope with it so you can have a better quality of life, not just physically, but also mentally. So I'm really excited for the next several guests that we have coming up. And they're all different walks, but I think all of them have experienced trauma in some way that have shaped and formed them into who they are today as people, and they're phenomenal people. I'm one of those people. I just really have the utmost respect for anybody that can come forth and be honest about everything they've been through and who they are today, and that they're not perfect and what they've gone through has shaped them. So I mean, I've told you this before, but if it weren't for you, I'm super grateful. This and some poking and prodding from actually people that are in the chat, I wouldn't be where I'm at right now. Like this wouldn't even be happening. So I'm super grateful. At the same time, I'm also super grateful to myself to be able to be willing to put myself out there, because that was my fear for the longest time, is being willing to be open and honest and put myself out there. Out of just, I guess, fear of being judged and criticized. So, right. So yes, I think, I guess in lieu of that, to close up the show, I just would really like everyone to kind of take some time to really self-reflect on if you have triggers and what they are, and to become more self-aware of them. And not necessarily that you have to go out and share with the world what they are, share with anybody what they are, but be more self-aware to work on being a better person, and not allow your trauma to dictate how you treat and talk to others in a negative way. And use your traumas, not so much that you look at them as in a negative light, but also look at them as a positive, spin it to a positive. Because if we always spend our time focusing on all the negative, we're not going to grow as people, and we're not going to learn to be humble and genuine people. So I think what's helped me realize that makes me more humble than ever before is to realize, like, my traumas have been horrific, but I've grown from them, and my traumas have caused me to be an awful person at times, but I've also grown from that too. So I'm not perfect. None of us are ever going to be, and I'm still going to make mistakes. But I can say, like, along with you with your lens therapy, like my therapy of journaling and going and hiking and going and doing the therapeutic things that help me get through my trauma, that's helped a lot. So figuring out whatever it is you need to figure out to work past your traumas, if it's possible, I think it is for everybody. That's what's going to save you at the end of the day, mentally. So
that's very well said. And it's kind of an overused cliche, chicken soup for the soul, but that's kind of what I want this show to be. Is chicken soup is like a comfort food, or mashed potatoes, or meatloaf, or whatever kind of makes you happy, and that's what I want this show to be. I want people to, like you said, see what you go through, what I go through, what our guests are going to go through, and realize that you're not alone. We all go through it, and this is how you can either choose to stay like your mom in her misery, or be like you, who recognizes your triggers and are trying to learn how to react positively to it, to be a different person, so you can in turn inspire others. And that's exactly what you are doing, and our guests will as well, with incredibly heartbreaking stories, but also stories of redemption, which I'm a big believer in. in resurrection and redemption.
Yeah.
Because I've done it, you've done it, others have done it. And if we can inspire just one person, if we literally reached one person out of all these episodes, it was worth it.
Yep.
So I hope that happens for our listeners and our viewers, because I'm a big believer in positive reinforcement, even though I put myself down and I try to build up others instead of working on myself, which usually makes me a great listener, but not so great in implementing my own advice. This show is actually helping me realize what's going on, why I feel that way, and how I can change how I react to it. So it's not just good for your story or my story, but it's group therapy. Even though we're not psychiatrists or psychologists, we're all just trying to figure out life. We're all trying to get through life. Again, that's what my parents did, who still probably make mistakes to this day, but they were just trying to figure things out, when I was a kid. And for whatever reason, they just weren't compatible together anymore. And no fault of their own, they were just trying to figure things out. Just like I am at 49 years old, still trying to figure life out. I don't have all the answers. But hopefully, if we bring attention to these issues, we can find ways to deal with them positively. So I appreciate you for that, because you've brought a lot of inspiring things and a lot of positive motivation, to where I think if I stop and say, stop woeing is me, and try to, not get pity from everybody and say, God, do I really want to live the rest of my life like this? Like, what am I gaining by being so negative all the time? Just let it go. Like Frozen. Let it go. My daughter sings that song all the time. If I hear that song one more time, I'm probably going to jump off a bridge. But let it go, because if you carry it forever, what good can come out of that, right?
Yeah.
Like, nothing good comes out of carrying resentment and anger forever.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you a lot for helping me, working through what I have to deal with, just by listening to your own struggles, because you've been through a lot. And our guests that are coming on in the next several weeks have been through a lot.
Yep.
But they've come to the other side. So that's a good thing.
Yes. So, all right. Well, good show.
Very good show. Everything happens for a reason.
Our plan B.
Unfortunately, our guest couldn't be here, but there's a reason why it happened. And I think this turned out to be a very, very good show, because we didn't really plan on it. We found out this morning and had to scramble to figure out what we're going to do. And we got a great conversation out of it. So I'm happy for that.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for everybody that tuned in, and we'll see you next week with Heather Sterner.
Heather Sterner. I can't wait. And I'm a big fan of hers and her husband.
Yeah.
Her husband bowled with my buddy's dad, Johnny Petraglia Sr. and Parker Bone, and they won the PBA League a couple years ago. So, I'm excited to talk to her and talk about bowling and talk about life. So next week, Heather Sterner right here. Next Tuesday night, same time, 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central, 7:30 Mountain, 6:30 Pacific. I don't know what it is in England. It's like 5 hours ahead of us, so you guys can figure that out. But next Tuesday, August 12th, 9:30 p.m. Eastern, for Heather Sterner, WPW. I always get that messed up.
PWBA.
Why didn't they call it the WPBA?
I don't know. I think you're thinking WNBA, but
yeah, maybe just
Professional Women's Bowling Association.
PWBA. I screwed it up all the time, but we'll have her on next week. So again, Amanda, thank you for being so honest and open and helping us all work through our stuff. And thanks to everybody listening and watching. We will see you next week for another edition of Reset and Rise to the Unbreakable with that one.